Got a spicy one for you today, and I'm not talking about picking up the medium salsa, which is going to give me heartburn at the local grocery store. No, I'm talking about a spicy story, and it's one that I'm going to need you to not euthanize yourself. That's not what I mean. Because that I'm pretty sure that means kill, right? And even though my parents swore they took the dog to the farm, I never saw it again. No, everybody take a big breath in through the nose and out through the mouth, and let's have an actual conversation about something that I want to have a conversation about. Mainly because I'm just another dude sitting here with something to say, something to talk about, right? The FA has come out and announced that it's barring transgender women from women's football. This is, and I'm not an expert in the court system of England or the United Kingdom. They basically came out with a ruling, I think, in mid-April that had something to do with this, and the FA is kind of falling in line with that. The UK Supreme Court's ruling on April 15th that the legal definition of a woman is based on biological sex, right? The FA has scrapped the policy, right? They were adjusting the policy kind of in reaction to this Supreme Court ruling that happened in April 15th. So it was mid-April. But basically, the FA has come out and said that transgender women will no longer be able to play in women's football in England from the 1st of June. So they have you basically until the end of this kind of calendar cycle in transgender women will essentially have nowhere to play. But I think most of the people are kind of missing the boat here because that's the only reason I wanted to talk about it, to be perfectly honest. It's important, but it's also so not important or relevant to so many things. It has become such a massive issue. Maybe not massive, but much talked about, right? And we all know the people that are talking about it. We all know the people that are fucking fixated on this shit. Like, there's so many other things going on inside the world of football, which I like to talk about, outside of the world of football, which I'm not here to talk about, right? But there are a shitload of things going on, right? And there's so many people that have just drilled down and decided to focus on this one thing. And I know there's a million talking points as to why, right? Everybody's gotten their, the way the internet works is you live in a walled garden. I do too. You got to be self-aware about that, right? But you open up your phone or whatever, and you live in this little garden where it's cultivated to try and keep you on that website as long as possible. So whatever you've interacted with, it's going to feed you more of that. You go down this rabbit hole, and then you assume that everybody else that opens up their phone and opens up those apps is seeing the same shit, when that's not the case. Or you're basically just living in a different world from a lot of other people. This is why, for the most part, I try to not have this in my hand. I try to go outside. I try to go for a walk every day. I might even touch grass every once in a while. But take it from somebody that works in social media, that is kind of inside the beast. Get out of it. Go outside. Talk to human beings. Or don't. Stare at trees if you've got a few wild trees in your neighborhood. I live in New York, so wild trees are not an easy thing to come by. But, maybe you take a train, go to a park, do whatever. Right? And that'd be very helpful for you to realize something that I'm going to point out right here. I'm saying all of that is kind of like a prelude to this number. The FA said on Thursday that there were fewer than 30 transgender women registered among millions of amateur players. There are no registered transgender women in the professional game across the home nations. This is a decision that, while it will obviously affect people in the future, people who I feel bad for, right, because they basically want to have a place to play football. We'll talk about that a bit later. But this is a decision that affects less than 30 people. Every single time Zealand, the guy that looks a lot like me, but clearly, definitely, totally isn't me, right, turns on a Twitch stream, more than 10 times that number of people are affected. Sometimes even more than 100 times than that number of people are affected just by that single act. It is really hard to express how little this fucking matters in the grand scheme of sports, and how few people are actually directly affected by this in general in sports. It's just not a thing that happens a lot. It is very rare. It is exceptionally rare. Also, given that number of people, I think it's a little disingenuous for the people that say that it is they're doing this as like a victory for the safety of of women. I think that's just I just think that that's not true, and that there are a lot of things that the FA could do that would accomplish a lot more for the safety of women in the world of football than removing less than 30 people from the entire FA. But, hey, what do I know? And it is stupid, in my opinion, that such a large response in either direction occurs in response to something that is not that big of a deal. Hi, the recording kind of didn't work for a section of this, but I wanted this video to come out anyways. So I put on the same shirt so that you wouldn't notice that I was recording it on a different day, which I guess I've kind of ruined with this. But when I say it's like not that important, I think that was the part that it cut out. Basically, I think everybody needs to be honest about why they're making such a big deal of this. It's because transgender people make you uncomfortable. It's like, obviously, this is really, really unfortunate for people that are transgender. And later in this video, I kind of get into that more. But I'm just trying to remember what I said the first time I did this. Yeah, I think that the massive response to this has a lot to do with everything that has nothing to do with football in general. Like, it's just, there are 30 people who need to be looked after in this particular situation and hopefully given a place to play, and obviously a bunch of people in the future who will be transgender that want to play football that need to be looked after. But it is like blown so massively out of proportion by people that just want to make it a talking point. I think that was what I said. I don't know. I've never had to really patch together a Zealandism before, so back to whatever else I was saying. I mean, look at it. What has the reaction been? And then obviously you're going to get a lot of people like that have been campaigning for this, that are celebrating this as some giant historic win for humanity, right? If the prime minister's being asked about an FA decision that affects less than 30 people, right? It's such a small decision. The FA actually, and to their credit, reached out to every single registered player with the FA at the amateur level who identified as transgender, is transgender, right? They were able to reach out to all of them individually. It probably took them half an hour to do that. Why is the reaction section to this so big? Why is the prime minister being asked? Like, I know why. I'm not an idiot. I'm just trying to point out the fact that I think that's very dumb. But as for the issue itself, I feel bad for the transgender athletes that are now no longer to play. They're no longer able to play. I do. I think it's dumb if you don't feel bad for them, because where are they supposed to play? I don't know if you've ever encountered a transgender person in real life, but as much as a lot of people on the internet would have you believe, let's say it's a person that's transitioned from male to female, they look like a girl. You can have your own opinions about whether they are or not, and I am not here to change them. I am not Asmongold or Hassan, okay? But they look like a girl, and if they walked into a men's restroom, you'd be like, excuse me? What are you doing here, right? And so that is why, if you're just like, if I can help you try to help you understand this in some way, not that I'm an expert at all, right? That is why these people would feel uncomfortable playing in the men's game, because the obvious solution is, we'll just play in the men's game. Sharing a dressing room when you look like a girl and identify as a girl with a bunch of dudes. I don't know if you've ever been in a dressing room. I have, as a dude that played sports. That would just be weird for everybody. Right? And it'd be cool. I'm sure you could find some dressing rooms that'd probably be cool with it. Maybe they would be able to play, and that would be great. But it would at least be uncomfortable. And it would be like an adjustment. You know, it's just not the same. Right? It's not the same. It just isn't. So I feel bad for these people, because they say, you know, in this article, it's a very good long article by Sean Kearns, Dan Roan. They did a good job with this. It kind of talks about it, and it is It is a situation where a lot of them are some of the 25 or so that they contacted for comments said that they basically were probably going to stop playing. That they weren't going to try to move over to the men's game, that they were just going to call it. Now, as for whether this decision was probably a good idea, I think that that is something worthy of nuanced discussion. I think that if you so blindly fly into that that if you are a transgender athlete that's transitioned male to female, particularly, that you should be able to play in the women's game, I think that's probably wrong. Because then you're just ignoring the fact that there are physical differences between men and women. Now, women have certain superpowers. They have stronger abs than we do. In case you didn't know. It's very interesting. Guys can do more push-ups. Women can do more sit-ups. That's generally how it goes. Right? But there's a different muscle distribution. Guys are generally taller, obviously. I think everybody's kind of figured that out. A little faster. A little more muscle mass in certain areas that would definitely help you in the world of football. And that makes it unfair. If you went through puberty as a man and then transitioned to a woman to be playing in the women's game. I think it does. And I think it'd be silly to pretend that it doesn't. But it's also silly to pretend that these people are trying to take advantage of some system. I think one of the dumbest things that I think people can do is pretend that in order to achieve an advantage at the amateur level of soccer, somebody's gone through such a massive life-altering event as to change their gender chemically and scientifically, right? To go through that process and any level of that process, which is intense and really messes with your body, right? That they're doing that to somehow gain an advantage at the youth football level, right? Like that's not, that is insane to think that that's happening. And it is even more insane to think that that would ever happen on anything resembling a large scale. And so what is required here is an understanding that there needs to be some sort of investigation. At what point should you be allowed to participate? At what, is there some sort of scientific or physical or medical test that you can do to say, yes, you are enough of a woman? Is that possible with the science that exists right now? I don't know. I'm not overly familiar with the process. I have nobody in my immediate orbit that's ever gone through it, right? Or extended orbit, to be perfectly honest. Right, but there also should be something of a protection of the games, not just to let everybody that's transitioned in, because that would be unfair. But the most important note here is that this is so overblown for how few people are involved in it. And I feel really bad for the few people that are involved in it, because I feel like 100 years from now, we're going to have this shit a lot more figured out than we do. I don't know what that answer is going to be 100 years from now, but this is kind of society trying to figure out how to incorporate transgender people into different aspects of society, sports being one of those aspects. And it's not a simple answer. Anybody telling you it is a simple answer is just ignoring the fact that it's not. Then I will tack on to the end of this. No, transgender people don't bother me. You can do whatever you want as long as it's not affecting me. I don't really care. And as somebody that majored in history, this stuff existed in ancient Greece and even before that. Like this is not a new phenomena. It's just our society that's trying to figure out how to make it work with men's and women's sports, and this is the latest thing that happened within that. That's it though. Back to some World Cup qualifying thing or something that I can find. I don't know. Oh no, Europa League and Conference League. That was the other one I'm recording today. That probably came out before this though.